Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Will from Star Hearth Astrology, and I am here today to talk to you about Virgo season. So the sun has moved into the sign of Virgo, which it did on August 22nd, and brings us into Virgo season for 2021, which will be the time that the sun is in the sign of Virgo. So that goes from August 22nd until September 22nd on the fall equinox when the sun enters the sign of Libra. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the particular characteristics of this Virgo season, about Virgo in general, as a way to kind of invite us into feeling the archetypal depth of Virgo. So what is Virgo in a very basic sense? Well, Virgo is the sign of personal wholeness. And when we explore this a little, we find some kind of puzzling archetypes. One is the explicit symbol of Virgo, which is the Virgin, but the Virgin not in the sense of purity, or of sexual purity, but of essence. And a lot of what happens in Virgo season, if we're paying attention to the harvest and the seasons and the natural cycle of things, we get the harvest of the grapes to distill into wine, the harvest of apples to distill into hard cider, the harvest of lots of storage vegetables, roots and squashes and onions, and they all kind of get harvested and then they get cured. And then they are stored in very careful and methodical ways to make sure that they will last into the early spring. And so we need to do that with care, with reverence, and with knowledge of what we are preserving and what we are distilling, right? It is very easy to contaminate wine and something goes wrong in the distillation process and it doesn't work and it's moldy. And right, originally wine and beer and these spirits were ways of preserving the fruit, but also of purifying drinking water, which was a big problem. So I'm not just speaking about alcohol in a party sense, but the different traditions around it and the different, drink also as a facilitator of ritual. So these things, they take a lot of care and they take a lot of knowledge and tradition and practices that are handed down from generation to generation. And practice is a key Virgo word. It's doing things repeatedly again and again and again, slowly building that muscle memory, being careful and intentional until something becomes intuitive and we contain the whole process inside of ourselves, which is really the joy of Virgo, is to come into a place of competency such that they can be trusted to achieve whatever they're doing. So that's the sense of Virgo. And we find Virgo kind of curious, almost, some might say obsessed with these small things. So one of my most cherished Virgos is Mary Oliver. And she is a poet who writes about kind of the magic of the natural world and small moments. And she has this really stunning ability to kind of open us into infinity from these very grounded, succinct moments. And she writes a lot about deserving and worthiness. And especially in her poem Wild Geese, which is fairly well known, but in the poem, she says, "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting." Right? This way in which, in our effort to be good and to be worthy, we humiliate ourselves and we beat ourselves down and we make ourselves as small as possible in this desire. She goes on to say, you only have to let the small animal of your body love what it loves. And that line, right, takes this complex, overwhelming task of earning a sense of worthiness, of earning a sense of goodness, which Virgo is very attuned to, and makes it a task of understanding what is inside of you and what you are called to, and being able to trust that, right? Being able to trust ourselves that there is something inherently worthy and good, and that our best effort counts, is a magic of its own. And then in the poem, she talks about the larger world moving around us and how the whole world kind of moves in this harmony and eventually announces our place in the family of things, right? The poem is a process of bringing us back, not just to ourselves, but to the larger world of which we are a part. And that process, that feeling of alienation, and then that knitting back into the harmony of the greater world is part of the process of Virgo, right? Virgo can be kind of just as self-referencing, just as navel-gazing as it's trying to purify itself. And I don't mean sexual purity or religious purity. I mean purity towards whatever ideals. I've seen Virgos, absolutely dedicated to sustainable agriculture and seed breeding. Virgos dedicated to whatever they're dedicated to. And then they want to purify themselves. And our Virgo placements function like this. They're hypercritical because they're noticing all the impurities. But what Virgo also does is kind of notice how everything fits together, right? In a very physical world sense, Virgo is an earth sign. And so I kind of picture Virgo at the loom. And so I want to tell another little story that I think kind of embodies the dynamic of Virgo. So in Homer's Odyssey, we have, on the one hand, the story. If you're not familiar with the story, there's a Greek hero. He's coming back from the Trojan War, which has lasted 10 years. It should only take a few months or a few weeks to get home, and it ends up taking him 10 years. And he goes around and gets lost and has all of these experiences. And on the one hand, there's a story of his adventure and his kind of initiation from being kind of this younger war hero, to this perhaps this older man who has seen and been able to understand a lot more. But the other half of the story is the story of what is going on in his home while he's gone. And his wife in particular, she has been waiting for him to come home and living in this faith that he will come home. But the people around her are not living in that faith, and they are pressuring her to remarry so that they can have a new king for the island. And so to kind of delay, she says, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to weave a shroud. So like a death cloth, a cloth to wrap a body in. I'm going to weave a shroud for his father, for her husband's father. And when I'm done, then I will choose someone else to marry and we'll move on. And so what she does is she sits at her loom all day and weaves a shroud. And then at night, after everyone has gone to sleep, she goes back in and she takes out everything that she has done the day before. And so think about this kind of holding pattern. right? Virgo, taking the matter of the world and kind of weaving it into the warp strings of time in a way that makes sense. But also Virgo is a very analytical sign. And with Mercury, it's also looking towards things and taking them out, undoing them, taking them out. And so in that way, though it stays busy, it's really intentionally not making progress. And so there's this, I think there's a particular trap for Virgo. I think there's more to that story. I think that story really speaks to the tension between the sun and the moon. But in Virgo, we kind of see this trap of Virgo being very creative, but also taking out their own work, breaking down the work of the world, undoing things in a way that doesn't allow things to move forward. But it's this rumination process. And Virgo is a ruminator, right? It's not going to accept the first glance until it's digested the experience again and again and again. And Virgo rules our intestines. It literally rules the part of us that takes the outside world and makes it our body through breaking it down into component parts and sending those parts to the organs that need them, and it becomes the tissue of our bodies. So, right, sometimes, we'll see often people that have gastrointestinal issues have difficult Virgo placements or something that's just not sitting quite right there. Right, so Virgo is kind of this way that we start thinking about not only our connection to our inner life, but the world around us as well. And we straddle kind of the full harvest of the summer and the changes that need to happen inwardly, developmentally, in the fall, and saving the harvest for the fall. There's lots of preparation in that season. And so this year's Virgo season kind of functions like that as well, in that it's a little bit of a lull in the astrology of this Virgo season. So there's not just like crazy bombs going off everywhere. And same way that we've dealt with a lot of tension in July and in August, a lot of planets wrestling with that Saturn-Uranus square that we've been working with all year. Virgo season is quieter in terms of those things. No planets go retrograde. No planets stop being retrograde and go direct. So in some ways, it's quieter. And the new moon and the full moon, they don't have these like crazy gnarly aspects to planets that are going to be problematic. But it's not a season of rest, because Virgo is not about rest. So we have this kind of lull, and it's the time to integrate changes from what you're realizing about what needs to change in your life and in the way that you work based on the things that have happened this summer and this year, and also preparing for how we are going to meet the oncoming coldness and darkness that is showing up. So I'm going to jump right in, and we're going to go over, I'm going to break down the transits, and we're going to break them down piece by piece in ways to kind of give you a map of Virgo season. Okay. So as I said, we're in kind of a lull. All of the outer planets are retrograde, which when we're talking about the outer planets, retrogrades are not as significant as when we're talking about the inner planets. All of the outer planets will spend between, 30% to, Pluto spends 44% of its time retrograde. That doesn't mean that you can't move forward on tasks. It means that those outer things are integrating changes. And when I say outer, I really do mean kind of like the backdrop of our lives. Uranus is not a personal planet. It can behave in some charts in personal ways, depending on aspects, depending on contact, but it's really speaking to larger changes happening. Right now, as individual people, we react to changes in the weather, to changes in the political climate, to changes in the economy. But those changes, but changes to our personal finances are not necessarily changes in the economy. So hopefully that makes sense. And Uranus is freshly retrograde. So Uranus stationed retrograde a few days ago. When these outer planets station, it's happened so slowly. They are so slow for so long. And what that does is it kind of underlines their significations. So if you have anything in the middle degrees, around 15 degrees of the fixed signs, so that's Aquarius, Leo, Scorpio, and Taurus, then those things can be activated in more stark ways during the stations, even more than during the retrogrades. So Uranus is going to be retrograde until next January. And so it will be moving from almost 15 degrees back to just shy of 11 degrees. We're also in the third quarter of the lunar month. So the sun went into Virgo right after a full moon in Aquarius. So the sun was in Leo. At the very, very end of Leo, we had a full Aquarius moon, and then both the sun and the moon moved into the next sign, Pisces. The moon moved into Pisces and the sun moved into Virgo. So the Virgo is kind of this come down. We enter Virgo season at this come down from an Aquarius full moon. And it's kind of perfect because an Aquarius full moon really pulls into tension what the individual needs to do, asks really what the individual owes to the collective. And then in Virgo season, we kind of break that down into action items. And we've got Mars and we have Mercury in Virgo as we enter Virgo season. So we are really able to take action on those things. And if you want to see kind of where that happens in your chart, look to whichever house Virgo is in. And so we'll kind of be integrating those changes, digesting those things till we come to the new moon on September 6th. And then we'll have these moments of insight. I like this new moon. There's some intensity to her, but not the normal things that we've been chewing on. And then we'll build to a full Pisces moon that happens just before the fall equinox. So we kind of have, so these next few seasons, they're kind of like bowls. We kind of start at these moments of intensity. We integrate the changes. We have a new moon at the base, at the heart of the season. And then we ride that waxing moon up to a full moon that peaks. And then we switch into a new season. So we've got, so kind of the big storylines, and you'll notice these are not tremendously big storylines. Venus is moving very quickly through Libra and Scorpio. She is moving very fast. She's going to go retrograde in December. And so she's putting distance between herself and the sun. She's getting very far out in front of the sun. And so you can see her. She's a gorgeous evening star right now. We have Mercury preparing for its coming retrograde. It won't actually go retrograde until September 26th when we are in Libra season, but it enters the shadow of its retrograde in the middle of Virgo season. So we'll start seeing those themes if we're paying attention. And then we have all of these planets through Virgo. So Venus has already made it through Virgo, but we have Mars and we have Mercury and we have the sun, and they're mediating between kind of the intense energy of Pluto and Capricorn, and the swift changes of Uranus and Taurus. So Virgo's job is to kind of make it work and figure out what to do about certain things. And so it's really functioning in that way. And so it kind of serves as a pressure release, but not because like you get to do nothing and there's a big exhale. It's like, here's all the little things that you need to do about this. Okay, So to break them down even further, on the 22nd, we had the second Aquarius full moon. You can check out my video. I have a full video about that. Mars trine Uranus, which is kind of this very exciting urge to take action. The sun moved into Virgo. We're now working on things in practical terms. Then on Monday, Venus trines Saturn. And that's, it's really nice because we have Venus in her sign of Libra, and she gets to work in a productive way with Saturn in Aquarius. We are looking towards the greater good. We're looking towards the greater whole. And so we're able to make commitments based on what we care about, and those commitments are supported. And there's not a tremendous amount of tension. We can make commitments that we feel good about. The next day we have Mercury opposing Neptune. So this is a very creative space. And so we've got Venus supported by Saturn. So we've got that Venusian creativity supported by Saturnian structure. And then we have Mercury opposing Neptune. Kind of, I would pay a lot of attention to your dreams. Whatever kind of mystical practices you have, those can be really potent with Mercury opposing Neptune, because Neptune is pulling analytical Mercury into the dream space a little bit, but Mercury can really hold its own and receive it without letting its feet off the ground. Then we have the sun square the nodes on the 29th. And it's not significant necessarily because I think anything particularly happens around this, but because this points to the halfway mark between the eclipse season of late May and early June that we just had, and the upcoming eclipse season in mid-November, early December. So when the sun squares the nodes, we're halfway in between eclipse seasons. We're moving from the North Node towards the South Node. And Mercury enters Libra. So now Mercury is not quite as feisty, not quite as pressuring us to take action and figure out and check all the things off of our list and make sure everybody else is doing it too. It's more into reconciliation and diplomacy, which I think we're kind of all, globally and maybe personally, we need a little bit of support for. And so Mercury is going into Libra. Libra's ruler, Venus, is also there. So Mercury is well supported to really be able to soothe over some of the harsh edges in communication. Then we have, that's not right. Okay, that last one for 8:30, that is a typo. That was leftover from last year. That's what happened last year. Okay. On the 30th, what we do have is we have the fourth quarter of the moon. And so we enter the fourth quarter of the lunar month, which is the great time to kind of wrap up projects, give yourself some rest, tie up loose ends, whether that means cleaning out the refrigerator and eating all the leftover food, getting to the stuff at the bottom of your to-do list that you put off. And then when we enter the balsamic phase of the moon on the 3rd, then really take some time to rest until the new moon that we have on the 6th. So we have Mars oppose Neptune on September 2nd. That can be kind of being exhausted. And so I think that kind of exhaustion and then the balsamic moon, because Neptune can really drain the energy of Mars. And I see that there's people with Mars opposite Neptune in their charts tend to kind of move in fits and starts because there's this, depending on the sign of Mars, there can be this tremendous amount of forward motion. And then Neptune, this kind of like psychic drains all the energy. And so you're feeling drained, we're moving into the balsamic phase of the moon, which is when everyone feels tired anyway. We have Mercury trine to Saturn. We're able to kind of sort out things. smooth things over while attuning to, the larger structures. And then we have a little bit more challenge in aspect with Venus squaring Pluto at the end of Libra. So Venus square Pluto can just make relational issues seem a lot more tense and a lot more dire. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes that reveals a deeper truth to things that have been neglected, and sometimes it just is a little bit dramatic and gets out of hand. My hope is that because we're in the balsamic phase of the moon while this happens, it will be a more reflective process, and people don't have the energy to kind of have these big reactions to that. And then on the 6th, and this is just before the new moon, we have Venus perfecting a trine with Jupiter, and that's just really lovely. We've got Venus in very good condition. She's connecting with Jupiter after Pluto, so by the time she connects with Jupiter, that should kind of clear up that square a little bit, or at least be able to, if tense things happen, move it into a more positive light. So Venus trines Jupiter, she's connecting, and then we have our Virgo new moon that happens on the evening of September 6th on Labor Day. So that should be kind of a lovely, though low-key evening. To honor this new moon, I have a special kind of ritual. It's a guided meditation and a talk on where I explore the question of what if we divide the lunar cycle into 3 rather than 4, and what kind of experience of qualitative time that could offer us. I'm really excited about this. It's not going to be one of my headier talks. Like I said, it's a guided meditation. It's really to open you up to an imaginal space and take you on a little adventure as an offering to the Virgo new moon. So that happens on the 6th at 4 p.m. But if you can't attend it live, I will also be sending out the recording to everyone. I'm really excited about that. So you can check out more information about that on my website. And I will, of course, be back here making a Virgo new moon video. You can also hear me talking about this Virgo new moon in Cosmic Tonic's latest podcast on Virgo season. So we also have the sun trine to Uranus on that day. And so the sun trine Uranus is really breaking free and, is really just the greatest connection of the sun in Virgo integrating the changes of Uranus and Taurus. It's really inspired. There's motivation. Uranus is fully electric and so lends a lot of energy to the sun. And so so it's a new moon that is really kind of, you can go deep inwardly and you will be supported by that Venus-Jupiter trine and inspired by that Sun-Uranus trine. A few days later, we have Venus leaving her very comfortable Libran palace to enter the more intense catacombs of Scorpio. So she's kind of the first one into the brink, and we're going to see this transition into Scorpio from all of the personal planets, the sun at the end of October, but Mars and Mercury sooner, where they get tangled again in the Uranus-Saturn square. And so that's going to be kind of a big theme of the fall, is the planets entering Scorpio and having to tangle with the square again. So that is kind of the shift change. It does complicate things a little bit more. Then we have the second quarter happen a few days later. So again, look at these. I mean, it's just not too many intense transits. We've got the second quarter of the moon, which kind of makes things busier. We'll have the sun opposite Neptune, which can, it can be these moments of realizing what we thought was possible is not. It can be these moments of feeling divinely inspired. But Mars is entering into Libra. And so Mars in Libra is far less concerned about kind of the productivity of Virgo. Mars in Libra wants to harmonize. And I had a client recently who is speaking about their Mars in Libra, and they said that they are an aggressive peacekeeper. And I thought that was just the perfect articulation of Mars in Libra, the aggressive peacekeeper. And so that's a little bit, it's not so comfortable, but I guess kind of the mediating factor is we have Mars in Libra and we have Venus in Scorpio. So they're in a condition of mutual reception. Neither of them are too happy. They're both in their detriment, but hopefully they're communicating through walkie-talkies so that they're not working at cross purposes. Then on the 17th, we have Venus square Saturn. So that is kind of these harsh moments where we can come to hard truths. With regards to Saturn, I find that the positive experience of these transits tend to be we have to decide what we're not going to commit to. And so they can be clarifying in terms of what we value and what we care about, because we are limited in a Saturnian sense with how much we can do. And then we have the third quarter begin with a Pisces full moon. And so that Pisces full moon is, again, it's off axis from all of the drama for the most part. So there's not too much going on. We have Mercury trying to Jupiter. So Mercury rules the sun in this full moon and Jupiter rules the moon. And so, they're talking. It's gentle. We're seeing how far we've come in the Pisces realm, but it's not super tied into the larger storylines in the background. And then we enter Libra season on the fall equinox on the 22nd with Mercury square to Pluto. And we, and in that aspect, we kind of deal with these larger issues and kind of wrestle with things that are beyond our control. So that's Virgo season. If you liked this video, please share it. And subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of this content. I have a bunch of classes starting in September, kind of all my fall classes. So I mentioned my Virgo New Moon workshop that happens on the 7th, the day after the new moon. Then I have a Saturn return workshop, which is going to be 3 Saturdays, one in September, one in October, one in November. I'm really excited about that. So you get 3 workshops and a mini reading with me as part of that for people going through their Saturn returns, but also just if you're interested in Saturn returns in general. Then I have my Intro to Astrology course, which starts just after the fall equinox, called 13 Moons, where we learn the basics of astrology through learning everything that we can, all of the basics about the moon, and then can basically take all of these things that we've learned through the vessel of the moon and find their correlates in everything else. So that is my Intro to Astrology course. And then finally, I have, for students of astrology who have maybe already taken an intro course, I have bi-weekly kind of group workshops where we all get together, we look at our charts, we look at the transits, and we practice noticing kind of what's going to hit our charts where. So I really hope you will join me for one of those things, and thank you for watching.